Are you just starting out with Notion and feeling a bit overwhelmed? You've come to the right place. I am a certified Notion consultant, a speaker at Notion conferences, and I have spent thousands of hours in the app. And here is my super condensed quick start guide, so you can start to understand and use Notion in just a few minutes. Ready to go from an empty page to your first small setup in Notion? Well, let's start with the two most important principles. Number one, in Notion, everything is a block. Think of doing anything in Notion like building Lego. Basically, Notion thought, well, isn't all software just made up of the same blocks? We have sometimes headings, we have regular text like here, maybe we have special style text. We can have color, we can have columns, images, buttons, right? But at the end of the day, all the tools that we use are made out of the same core components. So in Notion, whenever you do something, in the background, you're actually adding these blocks. For example, whenever you hit enter, what you'll notice, it tells you, you can write something, press space for AI or slash for commands. And we'll talk about slash in a second more, but if you type slash, you now see all these basic building blocks that you can add to the page to make it up. And of course, if it's just text, right, then it looks similar to a Word document, but the difference is that it's actually all separate. And you see that also if you hover with your mouse over these different blocks, you see these 6 dots appearing on the side. And every time the 6 dots indicated this is a new block. So this empty line is a block, this heading is a block, and I can click on these 6 dots and I can drag that block around. Right? And you see then now this blue indicator line that indicates where I would drop this block. So I can drop it below this one, right? Now it's actually inside the quote. I can drop it and take it out again, right? I can drop it below this one. I can also move it into a column. And you see, if I move it anywhere here, this blue indicator now indicates that it's only taking up half the space because it is in one column. We will talk about this block concept in more depth in a moment. For now, just remember that whenever you press enter in Notion, right, and you add a new line, this is actually a separate block. It behaves differently. You can move it around. You can turn it into things. And when you create your pages, whether it's just writing text or building a complex habit tracker, putting Lego blocks together to build something cool out of components. Now for the second concept. In Notion, there are no folders, just pages. This is probably the thing that's most confusing about Notion to new users, because it's so different to how other tools work. Traditionally, right, we're used to this sort of structure. We have folders, and inside our folders we have subfolders, and then at some point we have our actual files, right, a text file or a spreadsheet. But in Notion, there is not really this concept of folders. Everything is directly a file, or in this case, a page. Let me show you what I mean. So here, if we look at our sidebar, which we get by clicking here in the top right corner, and then having this show parallelly, we see under this private section, I have this element, right, which has the same title as this one, like Lego for my systems. Now, if I click on plus here to, would usually create a folder, here I actually add a page. So I have a new page, right, and I could call this notes. Now, it shows up here on the sidebar. So far, so good. But now, after a while, as a new user, right, I might add some new ones. I might add some shopping list, right? I might add my habits, and so on and so on. And all of a sudden, my sidebar here keeps growing and growing until I have like dozens of pages here and nothing is structured. And that is, of course, very overwhelming. But just because these are pages where you can write something doesn't mean that they have to stay just that. Instead, you can use them like supercharged folders. And with that, what I mean is that you can actually create pages inside pages. So if let's say, for example, we create a new page for my private life, right? It's all up as a folder. Or if you follow the Para methodology, right, you might know that one. In Para, you have projects, areas, resources, and an archive. Now, instead of creating, like folders, what we can do now is we can create in this page other pages. And to do so, what we can do is simply click on plus or type slash and then search for page. And now it tells us we embed a subpage in here. So let's do that, and let's call this projects. And what you see now, if you move here, you see these breadcrumbs at the top and it tells you, well, projects lives inside Para. And if I, here on the sidebar, also look at my Para page, right? If I open this toggle, I see there's a page inside. And this now already looks like a folder structure. So I can go back to my main page and I can type slash page again. And I can call this areas. And we see I have now under my top level page, 2 sub pages nested. So this behaves like a folder. But it is better because not just can you store elements inside Para, but you can also just use any other blocks. So unlike in a folder, right, where you can just sort it maybe alphabetically, you can also say here, okay, I could add some context. So for example, my most important pages, right? I could bold this, and then I could have like another section, my other pages, and then again add pages below here. So just because there's no element that is called a folder doesn't mean we don't have something that can behave the same way in Notion. Now, there is actually a far more powerful way to organize your elements in Notion, and it includes databases. But we'll talk about that in the end. For now, just remember that pages are actually better than folders because they can both contain the actual information, right? Some text or some article, but they can also serve as an area where you then group elements and other pages together. So basically supercharged folders that can have both context and structure. Now let's start actually working with these pages. So I've added resource and archive as well, and I will hide the sidebar just so we don't get distracted. And then I will click into resources. Again, we can see here at the top right, I'm inside Parva resources. This is my Notion page. In terms of elements of a Notion page, what you'll always have is a heading, right? This is the actual title. There's no way to have this removed. I can delete it, but it will then keep telling me, new page. So I better just give it a title. As long as I hover over the title, I see also these 3 options here to add an icon, a cover, and a comment. We can ignore comments for now, but icons and covers are how you add style elements to it. So if I click on add an icon, this page now allows me to pick an emoji or a specific minimal icon. Under the minimal icons, I can also change the color, right? If I want them all in blue, for example, and I wanted to give it a Notion logo, or in this case, right, since it's an archive, maybe let's look for a box, and then we can use that. Alternatively, you can also upload your own custom icons and emojis if you want to, but I want to go with this box. And now you see I get this icon above the title, and I also get it to show up here. Plus, if you look at the sidebar, the resources now has this blue icon as well. So this is a great way to visually separate your different pages, right, and make it much easier to recognize it. So I recommend that you set icons on all your pages. Moving on, we can then click on add a cover to add this top level element, right? And it will automatically pick some of the standard ones. We can reposition it, right? If you want to see a different part of this image, we can cancel this and then change the cover. And here Notion has a few preloaded options. It's a bit cut off here now because I'm so zoomed in. So let's actually go out a bit. And we can upload our own ones. We can link to something, or we can use Unsplash to search for images. It's nice to add a little bit of personality to the page. And if you ever want to remove it again, you click on change cover and then on remove for a more cleaner look. Now the last styling for the page is hidden behind the 3 dots in the top right corner. Basically, wherever in Notion you see either 3 or 6 dots, you will find more options. And the options in the top right corner apply to the whole page that you're looking at. So if I click on these 3 dots, one thing that I see is that I can actually change the font. So I could say, actually, I prefer a serif font, or I prefer the mono font. Very, very important though, this applies only to this specific page, right? So if I select now my mono font here, and I go to one of my other pages, for example, to areas, I see that this has still the default one. So I would need to go in here as well and click on mono to apply it. That's of course very annoying if you have to do it individually, but there's a tip, and I'll share that with you at the end of this video, how you can make sure that all your pages have a certain look if you want to. The other option that is sometimes quite interesting here is the small text option, right? If you want to have it much smaller, or the full width. Now, in order to really see that, actually let me zoom out a little bit more, because if we're like very zoomed in, we don't really notice it. But here, you'll see now, if I click below resource, the title, I can start writing here. But this leaves quite some white space here on the side. And if you are on a big screen, this can potentially leave a lot of white screen. If you want Notion to take up the full width of your page, again, 3 dots and then full width, and then you have the whole screen available to type. Although often, if it's just about text in Notion, the smaller width looks quite good because it automatically centers everything here. On a new page, you also see that Notion will suggest you some starting resource, right? It shows you AI to help you write something and asks you whether you want to create a table, a form, or look at any templates. You can also click on the 3 dots to see more options, but actually we want to start from scratch without any help. So in order to do that, we simply click below the title. And you see, the second I do this, it gives me this, again, like this little highlight, write something or press space. So we can simply say, hello world, exclamation mark. And then if we wanted to, we could press enter. And remember, everything in Notion is a block. So here is my one block, and I just created my second block. Whenever I press enter, I get a new block. And if I hover over any block, these 6 dots, right, that I used before to drag things around, I can of course do this here as well, right, reorder these blocks. But I can also click on these 6 dots. Because, as I said, if you ever see 3 dots or 6 dots, that means settings in Notion. So let's click on it and see what we can actually do. You see that we can comment and suggest, we can ignore that, ask AI, delete, all nice, we can duplicate it, but the magic is turn into. If we hover over turn into, we see all the block types that this block could be. And by simply clicking on another block type, we just modify it. So even though we create a text, because by default, whenever you write something, right, it is always text, but we click on the 6 dots, and we can now say, actually, hello world, that is supposed to be a heading. So I click on the 6 dots, I say turn into, and I turn it into my heading 1. Voila. And for my second block, right, I could again click on the 6 dots, say turn into maybe a heading level 2. And then for the last one, we again turn it into heading level 3. And these are now the 3 heading available in Notion. You see it automatically also adds some spacing between them so that everything looks nice on your page. Pretty cool. Now, instead of doing it like this, right, creating text and then turning it into something, you can also simply click on plus. That will allow you to scroll through all the options, right, and add a heading that way. Or, and that I highly recommend that you start using this, typing slash. Now, the slash command is probably the most important thing that you can learn in the beginning in Notion, because it gives you access to all the blocks that you have, and it's much, much faster to add them. Not just can you then scroll through a list, but you can actually also start typing and will filter it down. So if you have something specific in mind, you are curious whether Notion has it, well, just search for it. For example, maybe we want to add a list. So let's just type list, and we see there's this database list view. Let's ignore it for now. But basic blocks, we have a bulleted list, numbered list, or a to-do list. Let's add this to-do list. And we see, okay, item 1, and I get this checkbox in the beginning, and if I press enter, I have now item 2, and so on until I press enter twice, right, and I go back to my normal text. And checkbox items can be ticked off, so that's pretty cool. Now we don't have time to go over all the blocks in Notion because there are a ton of them. So I just recommend that you go anywhere, type slash, and then look through a few options. But I want to highlight some of the most useful ones. We already had headings and checkbox items. Now another one that is super, super useful is a toggle. So if you type slash toggle, you see this toggle list. Now if I add this, I can just hide or show. Let's give this a title. And then I have this little arrow and I can open it to expand. And then I have inside this toggle, again, blocks. So, my block, another block. And I can close this to just hide it, which is super, super useful. It's hard to emphasize just how useful it is to have information on a page and being able to hide it. Now, inside this toggle, you can add any other type of block. So I can type also slash h1, right? And I can get a very big heading in here. And I can hide it, again, by clicking here. And you can use the 6 dots from previously, right, to move things on. So if I actually want to have this H3 inside my toggle, I can start moving this around, right? And when I'm inside the toggle, it will highlight the whole thing, which tells me I'm about to drop it in here. And of course, the other way works as well, right? I can drop things outside. Next up, let's organize our page a little bit better by adding columns. To do so, let's again type slash and search for column. And we see we can create 2, 3, 4, or 5 columns by default. So let's add 2 columns. And for now, nothing really seems to have happened. But you notice that now our text here drags. And if you hover over it, you actually see that the second I go to the side, I get another plus icon and 6 dots, which indicates, well, even if I don't see it, there's another block here, right? So we have block 1, and then if I go over here, we have block 2. You can also create these columns by actually dragging text to the side of it, right? So if I take any block and I move it not below something, but I move it to the very side, you see my line changes to the side indicator. And that's also how I drop it next to it and how I can create these columns by dragging and dropping. But usually typing slash is just easier. And again, of course, in any column, right, you can have any type of information. So I can now click at this block and transform it into a small, medium-sized heading, this one as well. And now I have some nice page sections. And then the last block that I want to talk about is a callout, which is probably one of my favorite blocks in Notion. So let's type slash callout. And what happens is you automatically see I have some color and I have an icon here. And I can now, write something. And if I press enter, I have more space inside this callout, right? And I can have something where I say, okay, this is very important for this page. But you can actually also take these callouts a step further. For example, if you want, you can click on this icon. You can of course change it, but you can also remove it, which then gives you just this very clean look. And you can even take it one step further and remove the color. Now, we anyway need to talk about color. So let's start here. If we click on the 6 dots, we can see then we have this color option at the very bottom. And in Notion, there are generally 2 color options. There's the text color, which is the font itself. And then there's the background. And we see here currently, we have the gray background highlighted. So if I move this to orange, right, I see now the whole thing is orange. And if I click again on color and I move it to the default one, it's just white with this small little outline. And this is a really nice design element for your pages, because that way you can give it a little bit of a border. And of course, you can use these callouts also in columns. So I can drag my callout in this side, right? Now I have this here. I can add a heading to it. And then I can take the whole thing, click on the 6 dots and say, well, duplicate, I like this. Now I have it twice. And now I can take the second one and drop it in the other column. Oops, that was dropping it above. Dropping it in the other column for this clean look on my page. Now we can color most blocks this way. So if I click on my heading and the 6 dots here on the side, right, I also see these color options. And I can, for example, say, well, let's actually give me some blue text. Now I have blue here as the font color. Alternatively, whenever you have some text, you can also simply highlight that text, and this will open up the context menu. So we have this explain in AI features at the beginning, comment, and suggest edits. You can ignore those for now. But here in the back, those are our formatting options. First, you see, instead of like clicking on the 6 dots, I can also click here on the adding 2 and change it, for example, to adding 3. This will apply to the whole block, not just the second, right? But I have then also my formatting options. For example, I could make this italics or underlined. I can also give it strike through. I can format it as code, which gives it this little padding, right? Let's remove the other two. So we just see it gives us this red color and this little padding. Or I can here at the very end add the text color manually. Let's remove this also quickly. Go here and say, well, this actually should be orange. Perfect. Or I can say, well, actually, I would like, this highlight effect. I would like a yellow background. And now I have this orange font color on a yellow background. So quick recap. And if you want also a little exercise after you finish watching this video, go to Notion, add a new page, give it an icon, click into the body of the page and just start typing. Then use the slash command, right, to add a specific block. Use the 6 dots to move the block around. Use the 6 dots by clicking on it to change it, right, turn it into a different type of block. And then experiment with all the different blocks that you can add to your Notion page. Now let's use what we just learned to build an about page similar to this one, where we have some information, right? We have a title, we have my picture, and then you have some sections where you share some information. All right. In order to do so, right, if you just look at it, the first thing we want to do is we want to create a new page. And remember, in Notion, we do this by clicking either on plus here or on the slash, and then creating a page. We're also going to create it as a subpage inside resource. We don't want to just clutter up our sidebar. So let's add a page, and let's call this, hey, I'm Matthias. Awesome. This is our title. Now let's add an icon. So I click on add icon, and I want to look for the waving hand, right? I like this one. I don't want to have an emoji here. The waving hand is perfect. Now, if we look at the other page again, the first thing that we had up here, right, are 2 columns. So let's go by typing /col, and we want 2 columns. And in the left hand, this is actually a code block because it gives you this line on the side. You can also see this by clicking on the 6 dots, right? If you ever copy anything into your Notion workbook, you're going to figure out what is it. Click on turn into, and then scroll until you see where it has currently this check mark. So I type slash and quote, and then let's just grab this text over here so we don't have to watch me type and paste it into this area. One thing that I haven't shared yet, but which is a great opportunity to do it now, is actually if you click on the 6 dots, you also see the options form block. Different blocks in Notion have different options, so it will differ whether you click on a normal paragraph or in this case a block block. So always a good idea to check out what you can do. So let's click here, and then let's scroll down. We see here, this is the contextualized option, the quote size. And we can change it between default and large. So I can make this also a bit bigger or smaller depending on what I like. Perfect. So on the other side, this is where we want to have an image. So let me just grab an image for a second. And then I can paste it here simply by pressing Command V, right, to paste an element. Alternatively, you can also type slash and say image. And now it gives you the option to upload a file here from your laptop. But in my case, I have it already copied. Oops, this is actually a good learning opportunity. If you delete everything in a column, then your column disappears. So let me just re-add a column, /col, and now drag this quote block back in here. So we have the same look again, right? If I now go here and just paste the image, it also automatically goes here. Now you'll see though, this one is a square image, and here I had a round image. So in order to adjust this, let me click on the image. And again, remember 3 dots or 6 dots, that always means options. If I click on the 6 dots here, I have actually not all the image options. So sometimes it can be a bit confusing in Notion to figure out, okay, where do I need to click? But when in doubt, let's try both. So 6 doesn't give me the options, but if I click here or if I hover over it, you see one of the options are crop image. I should also be able to click on here, right, and see crop image there. Now, if I click on that, I can then, oops, let's click out of it and again on it. I can then say, well, actually, I would like this to be rounded. So up here under the shapes, let's pick a circle and now save. And now I have my rounded headshot here at the top of the page. Moving on, below our top section, we see now that we have these always heading, then this divider, and then text. So in order to do that, let's go here, click below our current last block. And we see here, this one actually goes over the whole page again. Alternatively, we could also just type something and then start dragging it around. And we see if I have it close under one of my columns, I get this small line, but if I drag it to the very bottom of the page, I get this big line, which indicates now that it spans everything. Perfect. So what we need is a heading. So I type slash and H, and then I can pick my different sizes, right? So I probably want actually a heading 2 here. And then let's call this our About Me section. Perfect. Next, we had the divider. So type slash div, and we can add the divider. And we just had plain text. So I can just grab this from here, right? Copy it and add it to this one. Perfect. Now then we had a second one, right? So again, H2, another section, another slash divider, just moving a bit faster, right? So that we don't waste too much time on it. And now I have here my content section with my top part of the page and then the remaining elements. Last but not least, we had like this area with some toggles. So if you just look at it, right, you can identify the different elements. We have a heading, a divider, we have columns, and then we have toggles, but not small toggles, but bigger toggles. So let's see how we can do that. Again, first, let's create a heading, another section, create a divider, and then here, again, get columns. So col2. And then if we just type slash and search for toggle, what we see is we not just have a toggle list, but we also have toggle headings, which gives us big text, but we can still hide and show sections, which is really, really cool. So let's add a toggle heading H3. And let's say, okay, this is one element. And then here, what we had, right, we had one in the other column. So we click in the other column and type again slash H2 toggle heading. Second element. Oh, and I realized this was an H3, but no worries. We can click on the 6 dots, say turn into, and then not H3, because that wouldn't be a toggle, but I scroll down and I see toggle heading H3. Perfect. And then for the other elements, what we can do is we can either have them as separate elements below, right? So I could go just below, and here it's my whole page again. I could create another set of columns, or I can simply press inside my already existing column, enter, and then add it directly below there. But we can leave it like this, or we can actually duplicate it. So let's click on the 6 dots, say duplicate, right? Another thing that's quite useful if you want to replicate page elements. And now we have pretty much the same look as on this other page. Now let's take a look at how far you've already come in this short tutorial. And for that, let's go back to our other pages. To do so, we'll talk about navigation a bit more in a second, but for now, we can simply go back to our sidebar. And now we see here in our private area all these pages that we should probably tidy up. But for now, let's just go back to Para by clicking on it. And here we see, okay, we have our most important pages. We have then resources, which we can click into to get there. And we have, hey, I'm Matthias, we can click into it to get there. And here we have our nicely styled page. Perfect. And if we wanted to share this work with the world now, we can do so by clicking on the share button. And here we have two options. We can either invite a specific Notion user, right, if we know their email, or if someone else who doesn't have Notion should look at it, we can click on publish and publish to web. And this will give us this random URL. Now this works similar to the way that share links work in Google Drive. So it's just this very long link, which is probably hard to guess. So if you want to share it with someone, right, you can click here to copy that link. And then they can access this page and look at it, and any edits that you make are immediately visible. One last thing, you see here that you have this very weird prickly carrot C58 Notion slug. Now you can change it, you can customize it by going in the sidebar, and then to the very bottom, here you have your general workspace settings. If you click on that and scroll down to sites, you see here that you have this prickly carrot page, and if you wanted to change it, you can click on the 3 dots, say update, and now pick a different slug, right? So for example, if I wanted, Matthias Frank is really cool.notion.site, I can save these changes, and hopefully it isn't taken yet. Yes, nice, this is a URL that has been not claimed yet. Click on done, and now my pages that I share have this much nicer URL slug than the prickly carrot one. With what we've talked about so far and a little bit of practice, you're already pretty much on track to master level 1 of Notion. Using Notion basically as a notebook, right? You have your different pages, you can write things down, you can style them in different ways, and you can create these simple information-driven elements. Now, level 2 is all about learning to use Notion as an organizer, and that's what we want to talk about now. The real power of Notion comes not from this pages, right? This is like a glorified Google Doc, if you want so. It's nice, it is pretty, it's easier, and has a lot more functionality in some ways. But at the end of the day, right, you could also go into Google Doc and create pages with this kind of like information. The magic of Notion happens if you start using databases. Now, to do so, let's actually go out of back to our resource page and add a second page here. And this will be a very simple use case, which in this case, let's do books, like a book tracker. So I type / page. And let's call this, my book tracker. Now, the magic of Notion databases is really in making sure that you can organize and structure information. So basically, unstructured information would be just having a page, right, and writing down, okay, I've read this year, I read Atomic Habits, I read The Power of Now, and maybe I also read, right, like, what's the third book, like 4,000 Weeks, right? And then I can just write it down, like I have some notes here, and I could go in, right, and I could write here, currently reading as information about like what happens with this, like read, and here to read, right? This is the current status. Maybe I also take some notes, like my thoughts, and I kind of hit enter again, right, and do like, like this, 1 out, or let's say like, this is an 8 out of 10, right? And this here is so far, my thoughts. Let's say like a 6 out of 10, right? This is sort of like how I used to take notes, and maybe we can style it a bit nicer, but it's fairly unstructured. Right? There's no way to now figure out, okay, if I have lots of books, well, which are the books that have the highest rating, right? Or which are all the books that I'm currently reading, or all the books on my to-read list. In order to have that, we need to structure our information. And this is, well, where the databases come in. So below here, let's type / and then database to create our first ever database. When we do that, you will get, if you have already a database in there, right, you will have these options. But other than that, you will just get this option, right, to start a new table here with a blank database. And I'm gonna click on that. Now, a database also has a few elements, just like a page. We have a title for the database, and we have these columns. And then we have up here some options that we'll talk about in a second. Alternatively, to create a database, what you can also do is if you type /page, right, to create a new page, and click here at the bottom, a table, you also create what is called a full page table. Now we'll talk about the difference between them in a second, but basically here, right, you now see that you can also add an icon to the database. But unlike a normal page, there's no other space, right? So you can't add blocks below or above it. The only thing that you have is the title and then the actual table. So let's delete this again. Click on 3 dots and say move to trash. And then back in our book tracker, let's start working with this one first. The first thing we want to do is give our database a title. So let's call this books. And then what we see is we can have here our name and we can create a new page. So let's just do this for now, right? Let's click here and now we can add our first record. And let's call this Atomic Habits. Nice. Now, the power of Notion is that I can now add these additional columns here to have more information or more context about this element, right? So whenever we create a database in Notion, we want to think about it in sort of 2 dimensions. This is the general idea. On the first column, right, we have the thing, so in this case, our books, and then in the other, in our different columns, we have information about the thing. So here, right, we have currently the name of the book, so Atomic Habits, and let's enter the second one, like 4,000 weeks. And now, in order to add information about them, we click on plus here to add a new so-called property. Here we see that Notion, just like it has a lot of blocks, it also has a lot of property types. So we have text property, number, select, multi-select, status, and so on and so on. Now again, the best way to go through them is to just have a look at them and figure out, okay, most of them are self-explanatory, right? For example, a text property is simply where we can write something. So we could have maybe here like a description. So I could say, okay, book on habits, maybe not the best description, and book on time management for mortals. All right, and simply go there and type. So that's already nice, but not that powerful yet. So let's add another property type. For example, right here, we have our status for the book. In order to do so, let's click on plus and let's search for our status property and add that. Now, whenever you add a status property in Notion, you see that by default gives you a few presets. It gives you this sort of like 3 categories, like to do, in progress, and complete, and then gives you an option in there for all of them. And I can now click into this option and I can change it. I can through that indicate, well, Atomic Habits, that is a book that I'm currently reading, whereas 4,000 weeks, it's to read, so that is currently not started. If I want to change these labels, I can do so. I can click on my property, and then I can say edit property. And again, this is like a UI pattern, right? So whatever property you have, you can always click on it and then say edit property, and we'll show you the corresponding options. On the text property, there are not a lot of options, right? If I see here, well, there's only like text, and I can turn on AI autofill. But on the status property, I have a lot of options. So let's change not started to read. So I click on here, that says the default option, and then I can change the label to read and hit enter. I could also change the color while I'm at it, right? So if I want to have my new books, they should be yellow. I can do that as well. And now I have the label changed. I can also add more labels, right? So maybe once I'm done with the book, I want to first like write some notes, right? So I could say, okay, in progress, like this is maybe actually like, let's call this reading. And then add a second option by clicking on plus here. And let's call this one to sort of review. Hit enter. Now I have this new option. I can reorder them. And I can then say review. Maybe that is purple just to change my color. And then if I click out of everything and back into my status property, I see now I have these different options. Now what else did we had? We had a score. So for that, we have now 2 options. First option would be to click on plus and add a number property. And simply say, well, okay, this is my score. And then I can say, okay, this had my score of 7, right? And this had my score of, maybe here I actually don't have a score yet because I still have to read. And I can resize the property, of course, so not take up so much space. Perfect. Alternatively, I could also say, well, actually, maybe I want like these labels, right? I would just want to like say like, okay, like it's maybe just like how many stars the book has. So in order to do so, let's click on plus, and then this would be add select. This allows me to select one of several options, right? And I can call this rating. And now for the options, I have similar to the status one, but I have this free flowing, right? It's not sorted into these 3 categories. And I can add an option, and let's here actually add an emoji. So I'm opening my emoji picker, and let's look for star, right? And then let's get 1 star here, take the whole thing, copy it, hit enter. Now I have my 1 star option. Now I paste my star in twice for 2 stars. Then I have 3 stars, 4 stars, and 5 stars. And now I see I have my different star options, and just like with the status property, right, I could go into them to change the color if I wanted to, but for now, that's actually quite nice. So I can make this a bit smaller, and now I can say, okay, book on Atomic Habits, that was 4 stars. Let's add 3 more things. Let's add first the author, right? This might also be information that is relevant. And I can add the author either as a free text field, or I can add it again as a tag. And actually, oftentimes I would recommend that you add it as a tag, because that makes sure that you always write it the same. Let me show you what I mean. So let's call this author. And we can also, in order to like differentiate these 2 properties, right, this icon, I can click on this icon and say, okay, actually I want a person here, right? This makes it a bit nicer and easier to recognize. And now here, what happens is if I go, for example, into Atomic Habits and say, okay, author, currently we don't have an option, but I can just type and create it. So I can just say, okay, this was written by James Clear. And the nice thing about these tags is if I go now into the next book and let's say this is also written by James Clear, I can go here and I see my option immediately. But if I have hundreds of options, I can just start typing and will filter it down. And that makes sure that I, select this way of spelling James Clear and don't have, some entries that have James Clear or something like that, right, and mess up. So that's a bit easier than with just plain text fields, where you don't have to double check whether you've written it always the same. You see also, as our database is getting larger, we're having some issues with the page, and now I would really like to use the whole width of it. So let's click on the 3 dots, say full width. In case, because I'm zoomed in, doesn't make so much of a difference. But if I zoom out, I see now, right, it helps me take up the full width of the page and have a bit more space to work with. Perfect. So 2 other things that I wanted to add was the drawer. So let's again add a select for drawer. And then maybe we have one last for tags or topics. Now here is where we would, instead of a select, add a multi-select, which is similar to a select, just that it allows us to apply several options at once. So we can call this tags, and then we can just say, okay, maybe we have here productivity and habits, right? And then here, this is only productivity. Perfect. Now to really see the magic of databases, I've added a few more entries. Let's start by saying, okay, I want to see all the books that I'm currently reading. We can do so by adding a filter to the database to only display things where the status is reading. To do so, we can either click here on Add Filter, we can click here on this icon on Add Filter, or remember, 3 dots always mean settings, so we can also click here and say Filter. So let's go through this option. It's all pretty much the same. We can click on here, and we can say, please give me a filter for my status. And gives me this little bubble here. Now I can say, okay, I only want to see the ones where I'm currently either in progress, so I see both, or actually I only want to see the ones that I'm currently reading. And there it is. Here are all the books that I'm currently reading. I could then, of course, say also, okay, maybe we want to then further sort this, right? I want to sort it maybe by the rating that I've currently given it to them. Although that would probably be better if I said, okay, let's give me the books that I've already read, and I want to see them, in a sort of like highlight reel based on their score. I can do so again by adding now a sort and say, okay, please sort by the score, and please sort it descending, right, so the highest scores at the top. So now I have all my books at the very top that are very good, and then going down to the ones that I've liked less. Now, if I had to do this every single time, this would be quite annoying. So what I can do instead is I can save certain views. So you see here at the very top, it says, well, this is a table. But I can click on this, I can actually rename it and say, well, let's rename this view, and let's call this currently reading. And then I can also click on this icon and change this, and maybe let's look for a little book that is open. Perfect. So it indicates that these are the ones that I'm currently looking at. And now let's modify our filter. Let's say again, right, this is actually the filter where I'm currently reading them. Perfect. Maybe also for the books that I'm currently reading, I actually don't need to see all that information. So what I can do is I can hide some of these properties. So let's go on the 3 dots, click on properties, and here I see all the ones that I've added. And I can now say, okay, well, hide all. Let's make them all disappear except for the first column. And the only thing I care about for ones I'm currently reading is maybe description. Maybe I want to be able to quickly change the score, and I want to be reminded of or I want to be able to apply tags. Right? These are the only things I want to see here. Now, all that information is still there. I just choose to not to display it on this specific view. We can then say, okay, let's add another view, and we can either click on plus to build one from scratch, or if I like this one, right, then I can simply right-click it and say, well, let's duplicate this. And let's say this is my, reading list. And here on my reading list, let's actually look for a list icon. Perfect, this looks good. And here we want to change the filter now. So we go to filter and say, well, status should actually be the to read one. And in terms of the properties right here, score doesn't make a lot of sense. So I will hide score. And instead, I want to know what is the genre, right? Because maybe I care about, mixing up my books. And actually, it would be cool, right, if I on this list could then change or like indicate that now I'm reading it. So in order to do so, let's click back on the three dots and say, okay, please show me also my status so I can easily say now I'm reading it. So for example, let's say deep work, right? I'm starting to read it. So I click here on status and I move it to the reading list, and that will have it disappear here because it's no longer on my list, but it now pops up under currently reading. Let's take it one step further. Structured information, right? Oops, let's delete this quickly. Structured information. So we could also say, for example, I want to group them by genre. So in order to do so, let's click on the three dots. Let's go on group and say, please group this by the genre that I have applied. And now what you see happen is it automatically has figured out that in these groups, I currently have books. So these are the ones it shows me. And these are the groups where I don't have anything, so it hides. And so that's perfect, right? We have the settings here. If we ever want to change them, but we can click out of it. And now we see here are all our elements, and we have little toggles to close them down. So I see at a glance, okay, currently on my reading list, right, I have sci-fi with 4,000 weeks. It actually doesn't have a genre, so I will apply one. So let's say this is business. Perfect. And I can see, okay, maybe I need to add more books to my reading list in terms of psychology, because I want to read more things here, but I only have one book on the list. The options here are endless. Whatever information that you have, right, that is sort of structured or has like different statuses, like whether that's books, your plans at home, hobbies, meetings that you have with someone, or tasks, use databases to organize them, and then certain views to display the information in the right way. Let's take this actually one step further, right? And let's not just have this one place where we see the information, but let's see it in different places. Because the really cool thing is about Notion databases is that you can pull that information into other locations. So our book tracker lives here right on this book tracker page. And that's good, right? That makes sense. But we can now go out and we can, for example, go to our main para page, for example. Maybe here I want to see always the books that I'm currently reading as a small display. Now to do so, let's hit enter. Let's say, okay, let's give me 2 columns. Let's link them, these pages, right, that I am organizing in one column here on the left. And on the other side, I want to add my database. Now, very important, we don't want to create a new database. We already have that information. So what we do is we type / and we say create. And then we want to get a linked view of a database. This allows us to display the information that is elsewhere in the database here. So you see, it asks me link to existing database. Which one is it? Well, it's my book database. I pick that, and now I see the 2 views that I have on my main database. They show up here as ones that I can just pick, or I can create a new view from scratch. Let's pick the currently reading one, right? Because that's what we want to display. And now I see here the books that I'm reading with the properties. Now, of course, here I don't have a lot of space, right? So I could actually like resize the column a little bit if I wanted to give this more space. But since I actually only want a very minimal view of this, I can also change the whole layout. Now, we haven't talked about that yet, but if you click on the 3 dots, you see that under layout, you cannot just display information as a table. You can also display it as a board, which is a Kanban board, timeline, calendar, chart, gallery, or list. List is the one that we care about here, so let's select list. And then we see we have now just these little icons. And if I wanted to, on the side, I could start to display properties, but it takes up much less visual space. So let's go actually to property and say, okay, the genre I would like to know as well. And now I have this here. It's still not enough space, so I will resize the column a little bit. And now here I have my books that I'm currently reading. This is already coming together nicely, but now let's make sure that it looks a little bit better visually. So for my most important pages, right, let's just make sure that we actually use a heading here, for example, an H3, and then let's use a heading on this side as well. Now, it can be quite hard to get here, right? I can't click here to create a line, but what I can simply do is I can grab any new line elsewhere, move it up here, and now type here H3, and call this my books. And let's call this my pages. And let's use the divider that we learned about previously, maybe, to add something like this. Or actually, rather than this, let's use the callout, right? The clean callout from before. So let's add a callout. It's clean, it has no background, right? I can move all these elements into this callout, and then we create another callout here on the side to move our database in there. And then we have our nice 2 sections here on our page. We can also, I don't want to add a comment. Let's get out of this. But what I want to do is I want to hide this title because that's a bit annoying, right? I have my books already here. So let's click on the three dots here and let's say hide database title. Perfect. So now I have my two column layout with the books on the one side and my other pages on the other side. Now there's one last thing that you need to understand about databases, and that is that every entry in a database is actually a page. So if I click on deep work, for example, right? It opens up here in the side, and at the very top, I see the properties from the database where this page lives inside. But then here in the body, I just have another page. So I can just, start writing here, and I can add blocks, right? I have my blocks here. So information, maybe I have, like my summary and so on and so on. And I can even go one step further. I could even now add pages inside this page, right? Remember, we don't have folders, but we have these, we have like pages inside pages. And that works with databases just the same way. The only difference between a page that lives inside a page versus a page that lives inside a database is that it will have these properties at the very top. Now you can also show and hide them, right? For example, by clicking on any property, you can then say, well, please, I want to, in terms of visibility, I want to hide this here. It shouldn't show up. You can even move everything out by clicking on customize layout and then moving all these entries right here to this panel and then applying it to all pages. Going a bit quick here now, right? You don't need to remember all of this. I have more detailed videos, but I just want to show you what is possible for your databases. And the fact that these pages are in here allows you to organize them and structure them while still having all the options available from a normal page. And that is also my top tip that I mentioned earlier to avoid cluttering up your sidebar like this. What I would highly recommend is that you have only a very few top-level pages, for example, the Para methodology or any other organizational system. And then for all these individual pages, you all put them in one database. So let's quickly do that. Let's organize it. So let's go resources and let's create a new page here. And this time, let's create a full page database. Let's make this a table and let's say new empty database. And let's just call this pages. And then here, right, I can give this an icon. So let's give this a single page. Oops, not target page. Perfect. And now we could add properties to it, but maybe we just want to organize our pages for now. So all we can do now is we can take the ones that we've already created and we can add it here. To do so, we can either drag and drop them. So I can take them out of the sidebar, drag them in here, and now they live in the database. Or I can go on any page, right, and say here, three dots, move to, and then my pages database. And that way, rather than having them here in the sidebar and cluttering things up, I can make sure that they are all organized, neatly organized in this database, where I can then add like certain properties to it to organize them. Maybe I say, okay, some pages are very important for me, and I want to make sure that, for example, I could say, let's add a select page, whether this is, active question mark. Although here, if it's yes, no, actually it would be better to make this a checkbox, right? So we could just say, active, and then we could create a view where we only show the ones that have the box checked, so we can uncheck it to archive it, and so on and so on. Lots of different options, but much better to organize them in here than just as, always nested pages. Now, all of this was a lot. Notion has a steep learning curve because there are so many things that you can do, but I hope this gave you a first idea of how to get started. You can simply create some pages, you can add blocks to these pages to style them, and then if you have any kind of information like books, tasks, and so on, you can create databases to organize them in a structured way. Once you've done that, you can then display the information from your databases across your workspace, right? So I can go on another page like my main Para page and see the books that I'm currently reading. Now to wrap up this tutorial, let's talk about one last thing, that is navigation in Notion. We've already seen that we can simply click through our pages to get to places, and we have this sidebar. Now the sidebar is nice, but one of the problems it has is that it automatically orders itself. It will always show you how your pages are actually structured. So in order to get to my book notes, right, I would need to open this up, and then again, it gets quite cluttered, in particular if you have a lot of pages. So an easier way to do this is to use favorites. Whenever you are on any page, that one you want to be able to access quickly, instead of clicking through 3 other pages, you can click on the star icon in the top right corner. And let me just, show my sidebar so you see what happens. The second I click on here, you get this new section in the sidebar called favorites with my book tracker. And I could go in there now and, also favorite something else. So for example, hey, I'm Matthias, I want to favorite that as well. And it pops up there as well. And here under favorites, I can actually reorder them, right? This doesn't change the actual structure. If here in Para, I move the book tracker from out of resources here above, it actually lives now in Para, right? Rather than in resources, so that's not what we want to do. But in the favorites, we can just move them around and it doesn't affect where the pages actually live. That's one thing. The second thing that you can do is you can link to pages on your pages. So here, right, we have a section for my other pages. What I could do now is I could say, well, I would like to reference the book tracker here directly, so I don't have to click into resources first. In order to do so, let's type add, and now I can search for the page. I can search for the book tracker, and I can click on it, and it says here, link to page. So now I have this little link to the page. It still lives inside resources, but I can quickly access it here. Now, it sometimes can be, in particular in the beginning, a bit difficult to distinguish between pages that are actually, directly in that location and links to other places. But the little helper is this arrow. Wherever you see this little arrow, it indicates that what you're looking at is actually not the original. It's just a link to the place where it lives. The same is true for databases, by the way. So if we go back here to my books, right, and show the database title again, so we go to layout, say show database title, you see it has a little arrow because books doesn't live on this page. It lives inside the resources. So that's the second way. Now, the third way is to use Notion search to quickly go from one page to another. In particular, once you have a lot of pages, it's probably the quickest way to do so. You can simply press Command P anyway in Notion, and this opens your search options. And now you always see the last pages that you have opened, or you can look for something, right? So going to the book tracker like this is probably the fastest way by far. Now, to make sure you get the most out of this video, I highly recommend that you now open up Notion and actually try to build these two pages. The About Me page, and then the book tracker as a good exercise to get familiar with all the different things you can do. Plus, as a bonus, I've linked in the video description also a build along video where I built out a complete habit tracker and a task manager in Notion. Two other very common use cases. So go check them out. They're a bit more advanced. They have a few more elements that we work with. But if you watch them and try to build along, this will get you up to speed in no time. And that's it. Congratulations. You've taken the first step in your Notion journey. If this got you all excited and you want to learn more, well then check this video out next. It is my ultimate collection of Notion tips that will show you a ton of tricks and use cases. Just click here and I will see you in a few seconds.